Right off the bat, let's get one thing straight. This is a case file, not a diary. I still work for a living after all. At least, I used to. Business has been slow. I've been writing this stupid thing to pass the time while I smoke and drink myself into an early grave. Who knows? Maybe I can even publish this damn thing someday. If I ever achieve something, that'll be the day. Tell us more about the case, Greg. Free for the night, Private D? Everything's in here. Now scram, mate. I lived out in the suburbs, a place called Plainview, named for its view of the city. The urban sprawl looked clean from here. Plainview was far from the action, far from the danger, far from the crime, far from any meaningful business. It was fit for a retiree, not a private eye. I'd probably be drawn back to the city if my landlord kept bothering me, but for now, I remained hunched over the case file, like one of those pulp slingers behind Tower of Druids or Twisted Wizard, praying for something worth writing about. I was going to continue to wallow in misery, boredom and unpaid bills until there was a hurried knock at the door, and I heard the distinctive footfalls of a young woman. The door opened, letting the bitter winter of Plainview cure my cabin fever. A young face with old eyes looked at me over, disappointed of my dishevelled demeanour. Oh well, someone had to show the lady not all crime files were tailor-made for tuxedos and titillation. I need your help, Mr. Effley, she pleaded through the cold. Frank Hills killed my best friend. Frank Hills? What the? Maybe laughing at the report of a murder was mean-spirited, but I did it anyway, much to the lady's chagrin. Police Chief Franklin Everett Hills, caught red-handed at last, and I would be the one to share this revelation with the world. I let her in and prepared to hear her story. I took a seat, a smoke and a swig to contain my smirk. Hopefully the phone book was right about you, she said, sighing. Chief Hills, famous, 22. I found its cast casing in poor Angie's forehead. He flashed it around plenty when I worked for him. Why do you think he gunned down the dame? Angie was known to explore the Plainview sewer system. Probably found something she wasn't meant to. My eyes widened. Frank never mentioned a sewer operation. Mr. Effley, I hope I'm not asking too much. What I need is enough evidence to go federal and a place to hide out until the heat dies down. You aren't dragging the fuss to my place while I still live in it. Shrugs bar in town tomorrow night. I'll get your evidence. Fame, fortune, Frank in a cell. I rushed to the city side gym locker where I kept my Hills Syndicate files, eager to expose them. We know about the girl, Greg. Not 3 seconds after I extracted the folders, I was intercepted by one of their thugs, a one Ronald Raleigh Jefferson. What girl? I replied. Raleigh giggled, a childish outburst that was more grotesque than funny. We're watching you, Heffley. Don't try anything unless you want me to come over and play. I left as fast as I arrived. Panic was kicking in. The city bore down on me like the world on Atlas's shoulders. Suspicious eyes of syndicate creeps stared at me through street-side windows and broken blinds. I still had a few hours before the city lights would roar to life, a few hours before the typical urban chaos and traffic would envelope the city at full swing. I went home to comb through my files and tailor the files to the girl, Holly's specifications. Even when leaving it, I was suffocated by the city architecture. The walls were closing in. I could have drowned in the files. I kept back at the house. There must have been decades of Hills Syndicate dirty laundry in my closet. Seized goods, kill orders, government bribes, and union pension piggy banks. The Frank connection would be harder to place, but the ingredients were there. I kept the receipts from my tenure as a secret secretary of sin. They would finally come in handy, paving the road to fame, building up my big case. The suburban serpents that called themselves the Hills Syndicate and their city-side overlords had their tendrils in all of Plainview. I recited their story as I sorted. The Hills Syndicate at first appeared to be of half of a house divided, while the Southern Plainview Mafia ran a lazy, fair game. The Hills family up north took a turn for the tyrannical, integrating into corp society. Frank Hills complied in the ranks of the Plainview Police Department, despite his familial ties to crime, one-upping his opposition with a quasi-fascistic drive against northern crime families, and frequently citing Mussolini's crackdown as an anti-crime model for America to aspire to. Of course, his hardline attitudes was a blatant lie. Frank wanted his own chapter of criminal fame and weaponized his department for criminal ends as soon as he swung into power. And in the end, he made peace with the mafia he tried to secede from. Taxes stolen, pension funds, and glorified protection money rolled in a teeth to the kingdom of the South Plainview Mafia, named for their location in the northern hills of Plainview suburbia. The wind sent shards of watery snow into the bag of evidence I was now carrying. The snowstorm was worsening fast. I was heading to Shrug's bar, a hideout for deadbeats across the city, my kind of place. He paid protection money to Frank's cops on time and kept them off his back with alibis aplenty for his clientele. As a result, he was invisible to them. Best of all, for my purpose, it was close to the house, and Shrug owed me a lifetime of favors after our time together in the war. I stepped across the sleet-lined streets to the warm neon glow of his place. Now out of the cold, I turned to stare at the shadow of my house on its hill. Even in the warmth, I shivered. I got the feeling I wouldn't be back for a long time. The bar was thrashed beyond recognition. At first I'd assumed it was another party turned bar fight the patrons were known to throw as a way of relieving the tensions of hideout living. Still, nothing had ever wrecked the place this badly. The lights flickered above, strange patterns across the room, but upon stabilization, I saw faint triangular footsteps carving through the debris. I followed them to the bar. I loomed over the bar to avoid the stains. They were etched deep into what once looked like wood, corrupting fossils slowly sinking beneath the table's ruined foundation. My hand slid down, returning with a gun still warm from recent use. The intruder would have held onto it, so I deduced Shrug had simply been dealing with recent unruly guest. The triangular footsteps continued to the kitchen, steps that felt familiar but were alien to me in my half-drunken haze. I took another look around the room before a curious bunch of hair caught my eye. Holly's hair. Frank's boys had taken her. There was no use waiting around. I steadied the gun and wedged my Syndicate files into the cabinet I got the gun from. I turned and traced the footsteps into the kitchen. The footsteps stopped at the kitchen entrance. The floor was ink black with liquids tossed from the shelves, conjuring images of blood-soaked trenches by night, of which Shirag and I had seen many. The lights were gone, and the only things I could see were illuminated by leftover rays meekly streaming in from the doorway. A giggle erupted from the room. I fired into the darkness. Nothing. I took a step forward, submerging my shoe in the soup of spirits the intruder had created for me. It stank like a slaughterhouse. I struck matches, squinting and searching the kitchen to no avail. The girl was not in the room. Neither, it seemed, were the people who had captured her. As I turned to search the other side, I felt the butt of a gun slam into my skull. The kitchen went black again. Sleep. I collapsed into nothingness. I stayed down a long while. All I could hear were Riley's soft giggles, falling like raindrops over my ears. Then we were moving. I was pressed into some old leathery surface and deeply penetrated by some kind of syringe. The poking felt nice. I fell right to sleep. I started muttering for someone, Holly, Shirag, to come get me. Not to leave, but it was pointless. The giggles resumed louder. I woke up. I was in the back seat of a car. Riley's cigarette smoke flew by the window. I reached out to some imaginary scaffold. The last thing I did before returning to a deep, drugged sleep.